Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Monday Night Football showdown slate between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Giants, and what should be a somewhat decent game for fantasy purposes because we have a lot of good names to play, like Leonard Fournette, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley sounds like he's going to be good to go, Kadarius Toney, and a couple of other options. I will say this game does have a lot to follow up after last night's absolute banger, which was probably the best game that we've seen all season long. Chargers versus Steelers. Nice comeback from Pittsburgh and just fantasy points galore. It was absolutely awesome. So hopefully this game can be somewhat similar, although I do have my doubts with the New York Giants at times. But this should be a pretty fun game to break down. If you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you. Versus the projections, no sharks, 150 max contests or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, when you sign over on PrizePicks, you can get a free money bonus. It's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think it'll be up for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, I'll start with the quarterback position. And up top, we have Tom Brady, $11,200. I don't think it's a question of if you want to play Tom Brady or not. You are playing a lot of Tom Brady. He'll probably be your highest owned player. It's just a matter of how much do you want to captain Brady on this slate. Because there's a lot of good skill position players, and I think it's more likely that a skill position player is in the optimal captain spot rather than Tom Brady. Not saying we can't captain Tom Brady. You could easily come out here, spread the ball around where there's not really an optimal skill position captain, and Tom Brady just has 5 touchdowns, 400 yards, and there's a chance that he could be in the optimal captain spot. I will say projections like that because he's the highest projected player in the entire slate by a few points. But with guys like Chris Godwin, Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans, and even on the Giants side of the ball, Kadarius Toney, Saquon Barkley, and a couple of other guys, I just feel like it's more likely a skill position player finds himself in the optimal lineup over Tom Brady, especially since he doesn't really have any rushing upside whatsoever. It's still possible. I'm going to be playing some Tom Brady captain lineups, maybe around 10 to 15%, but I'll definitely be heavier on some of the skill position players like Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, the guys going to throw the ball to. And if you are going to captain one of those two, you got to make sure Tom Brady is in your flex spot. I'll probably be close to 100% ownership on Tom Brady tonight, to be honest, but a lot of that will be more so in the flex spot rather than the captain spot. The matchup versus the Giants, it's whatever. It's kind of mid-pack. They're 11th DA versus the pass, 14th versus fantasy quarterbacks this year, but we have a 30-point implied team total. They are 10.5-point favorites. There's always a chance they can run the ball more so in the second half, and Leonard Fournette's the guy you want in your captain spot. Certainly possible. The passing attack should still do some damage here. They're averaging nearly 320 passing yards per game. They throw the ball about 40 times per game, 3 passing touchdowns. No reason not to like Tom Brady. Daniel Jones at $9,600. He's considerably cheaper. He's actually quite easy to fit in your lineups at that price point for a quarterback. They're 10.5-point dogs on the road. They should be throwing the ball quite a bit. But does not always mean there's just going to be a ton of fantasy points because we've seen offenses at times just completely suck, and even though if they are playing from behind, they still can't move the football. I will say it's not a bad matchup versus the Tampa Bay secondary. They haven't been that great versus quarterbacks this year. They're actually 24th versus fantasy quarterbacks. And Daniel Jones does offer you a little bit of rushing upside, which does boost his floor a little bit. So I think Daniel Jones is certainly fine. I won't be as high owned on him as I will probably guys like Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Tom Brady, or maybe even Leonard Fournette. But I still like Daniel Jones. He runs the ball. He hasn't been running the ball as much as he was earlier in the season with as much success, but he still runs the ball a bit, which does give him a nice added floor, close to 30 rushing yards per game this season. But he's got good skill position players to get the ball to, in Kadarius Toney, Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley being back is going to be big for him out of the backfield. And we've been saying it for a couple years now. You cannot really run on the Buccaneers. I feel like the Giants will probably be in a pass-heavy game script here, especially playing from behind on the road. So I think Daniel Jones is a fine play. He's not a must-play in this slate, but he is definitely viable. Probably won't have too much of him in the captain spot. I would rather captain Brady, even though Daniel Jones does offer the rushing upside, which I think is more appealing in the captain spot. But I just think the Giants will probably more than less than likely to score a lot of points than the Buccaneers on this slate. So then moving over to our lineup, but like I always say, guys, I don't actually just play the lineup I make on YouTube. It's just to see what fits as we talk through it. So don't just copy and paste this, please. I use my optimizer. I'm probably not playing this lineup, to be honest, unless it just pops up on my 150 max from the optimizer. But for right now, like I said, both quarterbacks do look pretty good. I'm not going to force in Daniel Jones for right now. Well, I mean, if he fits, great, but if not, I don't think it's a big deal. But we are going to play Tom Brady in the flex spot, and then we'll talk through the other positions and kind of fill the rest out. Then moving on to the running back position, we will start with the Buccaneers first, which is basically just Leonard Fournette at $10,000. Then you're kind of hoping that Gino Bernard and Ronald Jones get touches if you happen to roster them. But Leonard Fournette is the guy you want. Very expensive, but this is a great spot versus the Giants. I could definitely see him being the optimal captain on this slate. They're 10.5-point favorites. They're playing at home. The Giants' run defense is absolutely terrible. So far this season, they are currently 30th DVA versus the run, and they're 26 versus running backs, laying over 100 rushing yards per game and over 6 catches and 50 receiving yards. So this sets up perfectly for Leonard Fournette. He currently has nearly a 13% target share, which is excellent as a running back on a team that throws the ball around 40 times per game. Over 5 targets, 4 catches, and 30 receiving yards per game. Also adding in close to 60 rushing yards per game on the ground as well. And there's been a couple games where Leonard Fournette was not really used as just a bell cow, getting a ton of carries, so those numbers are skewed a little bit. But for the most part, he is the clear-cut RB1 in this team. Yes, Giovanni Bernard, Ronald Jones, they will get touches here and there. Giovanni Bernard more so on third downs and if they're trailing, kind of like last week versus Washington. And Ronald Jones, if they're up a ton, maybe we see him get a few carries. He gets a couple carries per game. He's averaging close to 5 rushing attempts per game, but he still doesn't play that many snaps. When he's in the game, there's a decent chance he's getting a handoff. And if he happened to fall into the end zone at $1,400, that would be a decent value play with Leonard Fournette. Do like him a lot in this slate. As far as the Giants go, it's basically been the Devontae Booker show the past several weeks. But now with Saquon Barkley looking like he's trending towards playing, he's going to obviously be the clear-cut RB1. I don't think they're going to rush him back just to limit him a lot in this game. So you have to assume it's somewhat close to a full workload. I think we're still going to see some Devontae Booker. But Saquon Barkley only $7,800 definitely looks pretty appealing because we know he's a great pass-catching running back. And you can't run on the Buccaneers. And this would be a terrible game script to expect the Giants to come out here and just run the ball because you're facing a very stiff run defense. You're 10.5-point underdogs on the road. So I can see Saquon Barkley getting several targets in this game. In the few games he's played this year, he's averaging 4 targets per game and about 11.5% target share. But like I was saying, the Buccaneers, 4th DVA versus the run, 14th versus running backs, but they do allow over 7 catches and nearly 50 receiving yards per game. On a PPR site like DraftKings, I will take the targets over rushing attempts every single day for Saquon Barkley, so I definitely think he's interesting. Plus, if they happen to get around the goal line, obviously you could just plunge it in for a touchdown, so I think $78 does look quite appealing for Barkley. So moving over to our lineup, for right now, I'm just going to plug in Leonard Fournette. Like I said, I do think looks like a pretty good option in the captain spot on this slate. But for right now, let's just plug him in the flex spot. Since I have Tom Brady in the flex spot anyway, I'm probably going to put a pass-catching option with him in the captain. I'm not saying that you can't play Fournette in the captain with Tom Brady in the flex. I'll have plenty of lineups like that. Plus, Leonard Fournette is using the passing game. But for right now, I think the flex spot looks a little bit better. I do like Saquon Barkley a lot. As of right now, though, I'm not going to force him in just for the specific lineup. But if he does fit, I would like to play him because I think this is a pretty good spot as far as his receiving upside goes. Then moving on to the wide receivers, we'll start with the Bucs first, which is basically just 3 guys, and we are going to be minus AB once again, so it is a big boost to all 3 of these guys, and Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Tyler Johnson, just because AB is kind of boasting around a 20% target share, close to 8 targets per game. You take him off the field, especially guys talented as him, the ball goes his way a lot. Take him off the field, obviously opens up a lot. So Mike Evans, he's more of the boom-bust guy. He's always a threat to score touchdowns. He's always a threat for a big play. Chris Godwin's probably your safer option. He's also a little bit cheaper. I tend to usually lean towards Chris Godwin over Mike Evans. Not saying I'm not playing Mike Evans tonight. I will have a lot of Mike Evans, especially in my just to pair up with Brady. I mean, there's no reason not to want to play Mike Evans tonight besides the price point. But Chris Godwin does feel a bit safer in my opinion. Plus, Chris Godwin's always capable of having a huge game as well. He's averaging over 8 targets per game compared to Mike Evans at 7, 20.5% target share compared to 17.5% for Mike Evans. The big thing is, though, Evans has a 31% market share of the team's air yards, Chris Godwin below 20%. So Mike Evans, like I said, more of the big play kind of guy. You can always break open a slate, but I do prefer Chris Godwin heads up just based on point per dollar and just the fact that he just feels a little bit safer in my opinion. And while the Giants are 11th DVA versus the pass, they're still 24th versus wide receivers, so I don't think they're going to have any problem here whatsoever. And if you are captaining Tom Brady, you got to make sure you just get one of these pass catching options in those lineup. I'd make sure I set a rule for that in the optimizer. But I do like Chris Godwin a lot on this slate. Tyler Johnson, he's been playing around 60 to 70% of the snaps with no Antonio Brown, but he doesn't really do much with his snaps. Only an 8% target share in the season and around 3 targets per game. He'll probably get you a few targets, but at $5,000, it's not like you're getting a ton of value here. Yes, the attention is going to be on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but they're good enough to beat their matchups in every single week. It's not like this is a super imposing one versus the Giants. And as far as the Giants wide receivers go, it's actually kind of hard to break down these guys because I feel like at least one of them is hurt each and every single week, or at least they start the game and leave with an injury. So it's really hard to look at the snaps and really put too much into it. Plus, we had the bye week last week. So really, we're looking at Kenny Golladay at $7,000, Kadarius Toney at $6,800, Darius Slayton at $3,200. You also have John Ross at $400. Then you have Colin Johnson here at $200. It's really kind of a messy situation. But no Sterling Shepard obviously opens up some targets for these guys. My preferred option would be Kadarius Toney. I think he's probably going to be the most popular option, which because he has kind of the biggest name there, especially this year. Ever since the Dallas game, we've all kind of been just enamored with Kadarius Toney. It hasn't really worked out much since, but the upside is certainly there. The guy is very shifty when he can get the ball in open space. And the Buccaneers do struggle versus wide receivers, ranking 22nd versus the position, despite being 12th DB versus the pass. He's going to throw the ball quite a bit. So really, all these guys are just fine run back options. I wouldn't make them like a key part of my lineup. But if you have enough money for one as a run back option with your full-on Bucs stack, like say you're doing a 5-1 Bucs stack, if you have to throw in Kadarius Toney at the end, I think that's fine at his price point. It's just really hard to narrow down exactly who's going to be the guy that produces much. But if we're just looking at their targets per game so far this year, Kenny Golladay 5.5 with a 16% target share, Kadarius Toney 4.25 with a 13% target share, Darius Slayton, he was a big air yards guy, 26% market share of the team's air yards, 14% target share, over 4 targets per game. Colin Johnson averaging close to 3 targets per game, although the sample size is a little bit smaller. John Ross 2.5 targets per game. He can always make a big splash play, but he's probably not going to play much whatsoever. So really, it's kind of just a spin the wheel situation and see what happens. So moving back to our lineup, I think the only thing I'm going to do as of right now is probably plug in Chris Godwin. I think we're going to go with him in the captain spot. I was considering maybe like a Saquon Barkley or Kadarius Toney to save some money, but since we have Tom Brady, I think it just makes sense to pair up Chris Godwin in the captain spot here because I feel like we're not going to be able to afford Daniel Jones. I don't think we have to force one of his pass catching options in the captain spot here. So we're just going to plug in Godwin. A little bit cheaper than Mike Evans, quite consistent, has a high ceiling, and a pretty high floor as well. It's going to leave us around $5,000 per player, which I think is totally fine because we could throw in a kicker, maybe just a cheap punt option, then we could still get another solid player. And moving on to the tight end position, we will start with the Giants here first, which is basically a two-man show, but Evan Ingram at $6,600 and Kyle Rudolph at $2,200. Obviously, the preferred option will be Ingram, but that comes with a price point of nearly 3x of Kyle Rudolph's. And Rudolph does play a decent amount of the snaps. He played 55% in their last game. I forget who it was against. I think it was versus the Raiders. Then we had Evan Ingram playing on over 80% of the snaps. So yeah, Ingram's the guy you want. He gets more targets, but once you factor in the price points, if Kyle Rudolph just happened to catch a goal line touchdown, like he's getting over 2.5 targets per game, close to 2 catches, 7.5% target share. Meanwhile, Evan Ingram, close to 4 catches on nearly 5 targets and a 15% target share on the seasons. Like they're fine if you look at the matchup. As a tight end versus the Buccaneers, they currently are ranked 25th versus the position, so they have been a bit leaky versus tight ends. But I'm just not super excited about any of the Giants tonight, really, outside of a couple of guys. These guys are fine if they happen to be the last piece fits. Kyle Rudolph, I think, is a fine punt option. And as far as the Buccaneers go, it all depends on if Rob Gronkowski is going to play or not. As of right now, we have no idea. He's currently questionable. He practiced on Thursday and Friday. Did not practice on Saturday. Probably going to be a game time decision, so that kind of sucks. But if he happens to be out, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard both playing a decent amount of snaps would both be viable. Cameron Brate's probably the guy you want over O.J. Howard, but at $1,200. If he happens to catch a touchdown, kind of a similar situation to Kyle Rudolph, he would definitely be a viable play. So just keep that in mind. If Gronk is in, I think you can play him. In the games he's played this year, he's actually been somewhat good, getting a lot of targets, although he might be quite limited. Could be more of a decoy. Not really sure. Kind of hoping he's out just to make it easier so we have more value plays with guys like Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard. But as of right now, we are TBT. Make sure you check the inactives and actives about an hour or so before lock. As far as defenses go, you know my typical stance. I am usually either even to the field or underweight on defenses and pretty much never in the captain spot. And it finally worked out yesterday. I barely play any defenses, and I feel like the past few showdown slates, there's been a defensive touchdown, but there's like 70-some points scored last night. So finally, defenses did not really work out whatsoever. So it felt good finally to be on the right side of that. And I'll probably have a similar stance here. I mean, if I was forced to play defense, I would take the Bucs over the Giants, but $5,200 for a defense, I'd rather play a kicker over that, to be honest. So I'd much rather play suck up than I would the Buccaneers defense. But you can play a little bit of the defenses, don't mind that, but never in the captain spot unless it's just an absolutely abnormal situation where you have like maybe like the Patriots versus the Falcons. I could see that scenario working out more often than this scenario, but I don't really have much interest in the defenses, to be honest. And as far as kickers go, typical stance is they are finding cash games, probably worst tournament plays, but they do have decent floors, but their ceilings are pretty low. But kickers worked out last night. If you rostered a couple kickers in your lineup, that did work out. I mean, Boswell and Dustin Hopkins both hit plenty of field goals, high-scoring game. Like, I don't mind rocking suck up tonight. I think he's fine. He'll probably score a decent amount of points unless the Buccaneers just score touchdowns. Graham Gano, I could see a lot of field goals with the Giants if they can't finish off their drives. I'm probably going to play around 20-some% of both of these kickers, like probably 15 to 20 for Gano, 20-25 for suck up because there should be plenty more scoring opportunities. But I don't think I'll captain any kickers, maybe 1% max. And just to finish off this lineup, let's try to get the kicker in just to find some value, because he's going to score points. Just a matter of if he hits any field goals or not. If he does, I can see him being a pretty solid play at $4,200. Leaves us $52.50 left for our last couple of spots. I do like Kadarius Toney quite a bit in this game. I would still like to play Daniel Jones, but that's just not going to be possible, I don't think, unless we play like an absolute punt option, which the punt options on the slate aren't really looking that great whatsoever. So for right now, let's just plug in Kadarius Toney. He's close to 7K, but I like the upside in this game versus the Buccaneers. Leaves us around $4,000 for the last piece fit. We're just missing out on the Giants kicker, Graham Gano. But if Gronk happens to be out, we have Cameron Brate here. Past couple games for him, 3, 4, then like a consecutive 4 targets. I wouldn't hate that. That would actually look pretty good. Then we have Darius Slayton, who has like 3 targets the past couple weeks, doesn't even have a catch, so it's a bit iffy there, but I think you could obviously slide him in, wouldn't look too bad. But I'll let you guys use your imagination on whoever you want to throw in at the end there. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. I'm going to take that one step further, kind of fish member over on Patreon. Extra content down there for the NBA and the NFL currently. Then we'll be in NASCAR once those seasons start back up again, but optimizers, ownership projections, all that fun stuff can be found down below. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks to see you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I wish you guys the best of luck tonight, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the Turkey Day breakdown.